Welcome to the Explainer. If you really think about it, the human body is essentially a massive, highly successful multinational corporation. And today, we're taking a look at its ultimate dual management system. We're going to see exactly how your body coordinates billions of tiny, complex functions using two completely distinct but totally intertwined networks. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. A soccer ball is flying right at your face. Without even thinking, you duck. Instantly. But here's the crazy part. While your body is managing that split-second crisis, it's simultaneously executing a decades-long strategy for bone growth. Or, just digesting your breakfast. How on earth does it handle an immediate life-or-death survival crisis while directing the slow, long-term biological strategy at the exact same time? Well, the answer comes down to control and coordination. That's the precise mechanism where your nervous and endocrine systems team up to regulate literally every function in your body. To pull off this kind of coordination, our brains and nervous systems are operating with a level of intricacy that totally outpaces the most advanced quantum computers we've ever built. They take in stimuli, process the data, and tell every single cell exactly how to respond. It's honestly mind-boggling. You can really think of these two systems as our two distinct managers. On one side, we've got the crisis manager. That's the nervous system. It acts locally and incredibly fast, firing off electrical impulses and chemical neurotransmitters to make rapid changes. On the flip side, we have the strategy executive, the endocrine system. This one operates a lot slower, reaching distant parts of the body by sending chemical messengers called hormones cruising through your bloodstream. They have totally different management styles, but both are absolutely crucial for your survival. Which brings us to Section 1, Fast Control, the nervous system. Let's zoom in on our crisis manager first. So remember that flying soccer ball? The reason you can dodge it instantly without even pausing to consciously think about it is all thanks to the reflex arc. You can see the pathway right here. A signal starts at the somatic receptors in your skin or eyes, races along the afferent nerves to an integrating center in your spinal cord, and then shoots right back out through efferent nerves to your effector muscles. And the sheer brilliance of this design, it entirely bypasses the delay of routing those signals all the way up to your conscious brain. You duck first, and your brain actually analyzes what just happened a fraction of a second later. How cool is that? Now, what's genuinely fascinating is how these fast electrical signals actually travel from one nerve to the next. So the crucial point is, they have to cross something called a synapse. This is a microscopic gap where neurons share information. Because the neurons don't actually physically touch, the electric signal triggers the release of neurotransmitter molecules to essentially build a physical bridge across that gap. Without this tiny gap and that chemical handoff, the electric signals would just hit a dead end, no transfer would happen, and your muscles would literally stay frozen. Now, within this massive nervous system, we've got this automatic switchboard called the autonomic nervous system, and it is split into two totally opposing forces. First, the sympathetic nervous system. That's your classic fight-or-flight response, getting your body revved up and ready for strenuous, emergency action. Conversely, the parasympathetic nervous system does the exact opposite. Once the danger is gone, it steps in to calm you down, slowing those high-functioning systems right back to a resting state. Okay. So that handles the quick fixes, but what happens when we need a long-term strategy?
That brings us to Section 2, widespread control, the endocrine system.
When your body needs those widespread, long-term changes that a quick electric shock just can't manage, we trade in the instant text messages for chemical memos. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer distribution of these glands. Notice that unlike exocrine glands, like sweat or digestive glands that use tubes or ducts, these endocrine glands are completely tubeless. Since they just dump their hormones directly into the fluid surrounding their cells and then straight into the bloodstream, they rely heavily on the cardiovascular system. In fact, they are some of the most highly vascular tissues in your entire body. So you might be wondering, why doesn't every single cell react to these circulating hormones if they're literally everywhere in your blood? Well, it's because hormones act just like a lock and key. They exert their effects by binding only to specific receptors on target cells. If a cell doesn't have the right receptor lock, the hormone key just floats right on by. And what's really wild is that cells can actually decrease their number of receptors. That's called downregulation, or increase them, which is upregulation, to become more or less sensitive to those chemical messages. Chemically speaking, these hormone keys come in two main designs. Lipid-soluble hormones, think steroids and thyroid hormones, can actually slip right through the cell membrane. They bind to receptors inside the target cell and directly alter gene expression. It's like they have VIP access. Water-soluble hormones, on the other hand, cannot pass through that membrane. Instead, they have to bind to plasma membrane receptors on the outside of the cell. This activates a second messenger system inside the cell to trigger the necessary enzymes. Moving on to Section 3, the executive suite, hypothalamus and pituitary gland. This is where things get really good. With these two powerful systems running the whole show, one fast and electrical, one slow and chemical, they obviously need a central place to coordinate. Deep at the base of the brain is the actual physical meeting room for these two managers, the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And this brilliantly illustrates how the posterior portion of the pituitary literally contains the axon terminals of neurosecretory cells, while their cell bodies sit right up in the hypothalamus. It's the literal physical spot where the electrical wiring of the nervous system links up directly with the glandular output of the endocrine system. As the quote says, the hypothalamus is the major integrating link between the nervous and endocrine systems. It regulates everything from your body temperature to your sleep and your appetite. Think of it exactly like a thermostat in your house. It's constantly monitoring hormone levels in your blood. When a particular hormone drops below where it should be, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland to release more. And once the correct level is reached, it just signals the pituitary to suppress production. Perfectly balanced. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into teamwork. Hormones in action. These chemical messengers don't always work solo. They actually have very distinct teamwork styles. Some have a permissive effect. That means their action requires simultaneous or recent exposure to a second hormone. Others are synergistic. This is when two hormones act together to create a massive amplified effect, like how normal egg development requires both follicle-stimulating hormone and estrogens working together. And then some are antagonistic, where they deliberately oppose one another. Now, while most of these interactions use negative feedback loops to keep everything in homeostatic balance, there are some rare positive feedback loops. For instance, during childbirth, oxytocin stimulates uterine contractions, which in turn stimulates even more oxytocin release. Let's look at a few standout players in this corporate body of ours. You've got adrenaline, released from the adrenal medulla. That is your classic fight-or-flight emergency hormone. Then there's thyroxine from the thyroid gland, which manages how your body uses glucose, protein, and fat. Fun fact, thyroxine actually requires dietary iodine to be synthesized, and a lack of it can lead to a swollen neck condition called a goiter. And finally, we have insulin and glucagon from the pancreas. These are the ultimate antagonistic partners. Insulin lowers your blood sugar by promoting glycogen synthesis, while glucagon perfectly opposes it by breaking that glycogen right back down.
So what does this all mean? Well, without this perfectly balanced dual management system, your rapid-fire, localized nervous system handling the crises, and your strategic, widespread endocrine system playing the long game, how would your body survive the next second, let alone the next 10 years? The level of coordination happening inside you right at this very moment is absolutely staggering. I really hope this explainer leaves you marveling at your own biological engineering and sparks a desire to learn even more about the incredible systems keeping you alive and thriving. Thanks for exploring this with us.